Hey, everybody, welcome back from break. So, we are hopping into Unit 3, where we are going to be talking about a time period called the Progressive Era. Um, and as the name implies, it is a period of time where progressive style politics, both Republican and Democrat progressivism, both progressivism and right progressivism, which seems kind of a contradiction, but it's there, are in vogue. It involves three presidents over a period of roughly 2 decades. And I apologize that this picture is about the only one that I could find of the three of them together, and they look like people you wouldn't let your kids trick or treat near. So Teddy Roosevelt, who in this picture looks like some kind of eyeless demon, Woodrow Wilson, who looks like the guy who has candy in the back of his trunk for you. You just got to dig for it. And Taft, who looks like he's going to eat you. So one of the things to understand is that for the left, progressivism is generally socialist. For the right, oversimplification, progressivism is imperialist. Both cases, they want to genuinely help people. In both cases, they're probably not the best thought out way of doing it. So in 1900, we're only about a year and a half, pardon me while I'm munching my almonds, removed from the Spanish-American War. The Republican Party is riding high on the hog. They have a popular president. They have just overseen one of the most successful wars in U.S. history. And there is no reason to doubt that the McKinley freight train will just keep on rolling. They again nominate William McKinley, a no-brainer. What is surprising is the nomination of newly elected governor of New York, Theodore Roosevelt, hero of the Battle of San Juan Hill, as their vice president. Now, it may not be surprising from the standpoint of Roosevelt is exceptionally popular and charismatic. What is surprising is understanding the context of this, because the Republican Party hated Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt was not an old-style conservative the way that the Republican Party was sort of made up. He didn't like the way the Republican Party did business, so to speak. He had been elected in New York, but the New York Republicans were not fond of him at all. So why, and that's not to mention that National Republican chief Mark Hanna hated Theodore Roosevelt. The feeling was mutual, by the way. So why would they nominate somebody to be president that they don't even like, or vice president? Well, it has to do with the fact that up until the 20th century, no vice president since Thomas Jefferson had been elected president on his own. The vice presidency was the place where political careers went to die. It was the place that you put people who, they had done a good job for the party and their time was now over, and you kind of want to say, good job, congratulations. So we'll make you the vice president. Some spectacular names like Schuyler Colfax and Hannibal Hamlin. More modern examples like Walter Mondale, Spiro Agnew, and Dan Quayle. This is why they nominated Roosevelt. The Republicans wanted to get rid of him. The only concern that Mark Hanna had was what happened if something happened to McKinley. It's like playing Russian roulette. You got 5 out of 6 chambers that are empty. It's that one that's not that's dangerous. But they were willing to take that chance. At the Republican convention, Roosevelt was unanimously chosen to be the vice president, with one exception. Only one person voted against Teddy. That person was Teddy himself. He knew what they were trying to do, and he wanted nothing to do with it. But unfortunately, he had gotten put into essentially a no-win scenario. If he had refused the nomination, he would have been viewed as ungrateful, and the party would have made him go away, and he knew that. By accepting it, he knew that his career was more or less done. In fact, when he went home after accepting the nomination, he was crying because he felt that his career was done. But being Teddy, he still threw himself into it because that's just what he did. That's how he was hardwired. Now, the Democrats / the quickly dying populists once again nominate William Jennings Bryan, Cross of Gold Man. And it was like a repeat of the election of 1896. McKinley stays home, talks from his porch. Bryan goes out on his speaking tour. The difference here is that Teddy Roosevelt also went out on a speaking tour, because if there was one person who could potentially out-talk Bryan, it was Teddy. And Teddy was real good at it. And Teddy had the advantage of when Bryan talked about how imperialism was so bad and the war, and one of the big issues for the Democrats, aside from the gold standard, which nobody cared about but Bryan, they tried campaigning on the Philippine War. And Roosevelt shut them down because he's a veteran and he was there and he knew what was going on. And it was a very effective strategy. The Republicans win a massive victory. The country is doing great. We had won a war and gotten ourselves an empire. There was nothing to be concerned or worried about. Here's a campaign poster real quick of the Republicans, emphasizing everything we just talked about. Prosperity at home, everybody's doing well. Prestige abroad, other countries respect us. Commerce, we're all about trade. We're all about progress and civilization. Middle class people support him. Sailors support McKinley. The old wealthy of America support him. The young wealthy of America support him. Middle-class working people support him. The Army supports him. Heck, Vincent van Gogh supports him. And in the back here, you can't see it, but that's actually a Union veteran, the Grand Army of the Republic. Everybody supports McKinley. In the background, boats coming in from foreign countries laden with treasure, trains delivering goods to factories. America succeeding. Now, with his victory, William McKinley is going to do a very un-William McKinley-like thing. He's going to go on a thank you tour. He is going to start in April or May of 1901, and he's going to travel from the southwest of the United States up the Pacific coast, across the country, and end in Buffalo, New York to open the 1901 Pan American Expo. It was like a mini World's Fair. Now, at every stop, he would go across the country giving a little speech, and he would meet people and shake hands and let them know how much he appreciated them. McKinley's security was not quite so thrilled with this idea. His private secretary wanted him to not do it. And what people began to look at was that in Europe, whack-ball Marxist anarchists had gone completely cray-cray. They had been attacking politicians. They were stabbing them. Heck, the president of Italy, in a weird, reenactment of Julius Caesar, the president of Italy was shot on the steps of the Italian Senate building by a Marxist anarchist. There was a lot of concern that McKinley was not going to be safe. McKinley wasn't concerned at all. Now, as it turns out, he doesn't quite get to do what he wants to because his wife, who suffered from epilepsy, had a series of severe seizures, and he had to put off the trip by a couple of months. So in July/August of 1901, McKinley gets on board his choo-choo and goes across the country giving his speeches and everything else. And he's going to end at the Pan American Expo in Buffalo, where he gives a speech. His speech is going to set the stage for what his second term is going to bring. A focus on trade. No more war, just trade. And America was not going to be a country by itself anymore. We were now part of the international community, and we were going to be actively involved. Here actually is the last image of William McKinley alive, giving his speech at the expo. Now notice how close everybody is here. This is the reason why McKinley's advisors are concerned, because of how close and how personal everything is. Now, as it turns out, there actually is a guy who kind of wants McKinley dead. His name is Leon Czolgosz, an unemployed Polish immigrant who is also an ultra-Marxist anarchist. He's also mentally deranged. He suffered from some form of paranoid schizophrenia, and he had come to the belief that William McKinley was the cause of all the problems in the world, at least in America. Classic proletariat bourgeois struggle. McKinley was allowing the rich to get richer, and the poor just got poor and oppressed. Here's Leon here. This is his mugshot, by the way. He heard a speech in Cleveland given by a prominent anarchist woman that convinced him that he had to kill William McKinley. So even though he was unemployed, he somehow got a gun and made a plan to kill McKinley. McKinley arrived in Buffalo on September the 5th. Czolgosz was waiting for him at the train station. But he quickly changed his mind when McKinley's bodyguards walked out. The next day, on the 6th, Czolgosz is actually in this crowd here. The problem is that he just couldn't get a clear shot at McKinley. So he got in the receiving line. And That day on the 6th was over 100 degrees in Buffalo. So, despite the fact that he had a gun, and he didn't have the gun, he had it out and ready, nobody said anything because Czolgosz actually put a handkerchief over his gun, and everybody assumed he was just standing there with the hanky because it was hot and he needed to wipe the sweat. As he got up to McKinley, point blank range, he shoots him twice. The first bullet, point blank, bounces off of McKinley's button. I don't know how bad of a gun you have that happen, but man, that's a bad gun. The second bullet goes into McKinley. McKinley staggers back and he's like, I've been shot. Behind Czolgosz was an unemployed African-American veteran named John Elton, who actually jumped and began beating the snot out of Czolgosz while the bodyguards are just like, what just happened? And all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, and they jump on. McKinley is like sitting there, he's like, I'm fine, don't hurt him. Czolgosz is arrested. McKinley goes to the hospital. On the 9th or 10th of September, Teddy Roosevelt visits McKinley in the hospital. And he's like, Mr. President, I'm planning on going on vacation. Do you want me to stick around? He's like, no, Teddy, you go have fun with your kids. I'm fine. Well, as it turns out, he wasn't fine because that second bullet that hit McKinley shot him in the stomach. And unfortunately for McKinley, he was so obese that they couldn't find the bullet. Now, the great irony of this here is that at the Pan American Expo, not even 1,000 feet away from McKinley, was the world's first functioning X-ray machine. They just didn't have him go and take an X-ray because they were afraid, because nobody knew what it would do. So, McKinley develops gangrene, and not unlike James Garfield, he ends up dying from infections caused by the wound. They go and find Roosevelt, who's hiking with his family in the Adirondacks, bring him back to Buffalo, where he arrives 13 hours after McKinley dies. And so on September the 15th, Roosevelt becomes the 26th president, sworn in at the age of 42, the youngest man to ever become president. Not the youngest man ever elected, but the youngest man ever to become president. And he vowed to continue the policies of William McKinley. And there's a lot more to it than that, too. So this is where we'll leave off for right now. Peace and love.